Parshat Mishpatim, welcome to my Parsha Shir. We're going to be talking about the very first pasuk in Mishpatim. We've spoken about it before. Generally speaking, it's the pasuk that connects, because of the letter Vav at the beginning, it's the pasuk that connects with the narrative at Mount Sinai, which is not quite true because there's another piece in between Mount Sinai and Ve'ela Mishpatim. But in a sense, this idea that civic law, that the laws that govern how a society should be run are very much part and parcel of the law that was delivered at Mount Sinai, the revelation. This is very much embedded into our tradition. We believe that there's no differentiation between spiritual ritual laws and laws which govern the way we conduct our society. That's essentially the backdrop to Parshat Mishpatim. And of course, at the end of Parshat Mishpatim, which I've spoken about in previous years, we have the second version of the narrative of the revelation of Mount Sinai, and it's the one in which we see the words Na'aseh v'nishma, because we don't see that in Parshat Yisro. But it's important to understand that Parshat Mishpatim, which contains a bunch of mundane laws about how we should conduct ourselves in our day-to-day lives, that is so much a part of who we are as Jews, as Ovdei Hashem, as Avdei Hashem, as servants of God. We are who we are because we know how to conduct ourselves in society and with other people. Let's look at the very first pasuk in Parshat Mishpatim. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim, and these are the laws, these are the ordinances, asher tosim lifneihem. If you're looking for the source sheet, by the way, it's a 3-page source sheet this week. You can find it right now. If you're watching the Zoom, you can find it in the comments section. And if you are looking for it and you're watching YouTube, it's a comment on the YouTube video, and if you are listening on SoundCloud, it's a comment on the SoundCloud sound clip. So if you want to see or print out the source sheet, you can do so. And of course, if you want to subscribe to my channel, either the YouTube channel or the SoundCloud channel, you can do so. The YouTube channel, we have a very helpful button that you can click on that will enable you to be regularly updated when there is a new video that's uploaded online. But let's look at this very first pasuk. Ve'ela mishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. These are the ordinances. These are the laws. The laws of what it means to be a Jew in society that you shall place in front of them. And we're going to see that the word lifneihem is a very important word that should be placed in front of them. We're going to see that is not a word that was just thrown away, that was just used randomly by God when he spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, that the word lifneihem is very, very important. But before we even look at the word lifneihem, I want to read to you a Midrash. It's a very well-known Midrash. There's various versions of this Midrash, and each version of the Midrash has elements in it which are not found in the other version. I'm going to take the version from Midrash Tanchuma because it has a piece that I want to focus on, because there's a beautiful piece from the K'sav Sofer which relates to it. But essentially it's the story of a person called Onkelos. Have you ever heard of Onkelos? Do you know who Onkelos is? Onkelos, also known as Achilas, was a Roman. And according to the Talmud, he was either a nephew of Titus or he was a nephew of Hadrian. In this particular version, he's a nephew of Hadrian. What we know for certain is that he was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. He was a student of the great Rabbi Akiva, and he converted from whatever religion the Romans had to Judaism. And we have a translation of the Torah which we ascribe to him, which we say that was what he wrote. In fact, the version that we have is probably a later version. He probably wrote a translation of Torah, and it's a fascinating translation. I have a cousin. He's called Meir, and he's my cousin from Bnei Brak. And for his bar mitzvah, he wrote a sefer. I have it. I didn't bring it with me today, but I have it. In which, this was long before there was such a thing as online resources. He went through the entire Targum Onkelos before his bar mitzvah and noted all the differences between the translation of Targum Onkelos and the actual words of the Torah. And that's considered to be a perush. So Onkelos is considered to be, in some respects, a perush on the Torah. And in fact, we know that the Rishonim, the Mefarshim on the Torah, use Onkelos often as a way of understanding with greater clarity what it is that the Torah is telling us. But Onkelos was this Roman aristocrat from a very distinguished Roman family who converted, Achilas Onkelos, converted to Judaism during this very difficult, very volatile period of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, and around the time as well of Bar Kokhba, when there was great difficulties in being a Jew. We know that Hadrian, for example, it's going to come up in this Midrash, forbade anyone from being circumcised. This was considered to be a desecration of the human flesh. You're not allowed to circumcise yourself. The only time you can ever have an operation or any kind of use of a scalpel, a surgeon, was if there was a medical need. But you're not allowed to circumcise yourself for religious needs. He wanted to destroy this very important, this central, this very deeply heartfelt aspect of Judaism. He wanted to do away with it, and therefore he forbade circumcision. You're going to see that this comes up in the Midrash. It's a very important point. So whether or not Onkelos was a nephew of Hadrian, the way the Midrash presents it, and you're going to see that it has homiletic purposes, that the Midrash wants to teach us a very important lesson about what it means to be a Jew. It's presented to us in this story as a narrative of an episode in the life of Onkelos in relation to his uncle Hadrian. Okay, here's the Midrash. Ve'ele HaMishpatim begins the Midrash. This is a Midrash Tanchuma. I told you there's another version of this Midrash in Midrash Rabbah, and there's other versions of the Midrash. Even the version that we have in Midrash Rabbah, there's various versions of it, but we're going to read the version from Midrash Tanchuma. Ze shama k'sav magid devarav liYaakov chukov mishpatav liYisrael le'osa chen lechol goy. We know that in Tehillim, we say it every day. We read the Halalukas, and one of the Halalukas ends off with the word, the Pasuk, Magid Devarav LeYaakov. He declares his word to Yaakov, Chukov u'mishpatav liYisrael, his statutes and his ordinances to Israel. Le'osa chen lechol goy. He didn't do the same for every nation. Umishpatim bal yudoum, and they do not know his laws. That's the pasuk. We end off with the word Halaluka. It's the final pasuk of that particular Halaluka that we say every day in Pesukei de Zimra. You daven every day. That's one of the Halalukas that we say. What does this pasuk mean? Onkelos Hager. Onkelos, the proselyte, the convert, Ben Achoisai shel Adrianus, who was the son of the sister of Hadrian. He was, for some reason, fascinated by Judaism. He was completely besotted with the idea that he needed to convert to this religion that he had discovered called Judaism. Min Adrianus doidoi. He was very frightened of Hadrian, his uncle. Why? Well, obviously he was frightened of him because Hadrian hated the Jews. He hated the Jewish faith. And how would he react if his own nephew converted to Judaism? The reaction wouldn't be positive. So he didn't want to tell his uncle, who was a mighty and powerful Roman emperor, that he wanted to convert to Judaism. So what did he do? Omar Loi, he said to his uncle, Ani mevakesh lasei schoira. I'd like to become a businessman. That's what I'd like to do. He went to his uncle as if he was seeking his advice, and he said to him, Uncle Hadrian, I want to become a businessman. Omar Loi, so Hadrian responded, Shema ata choser kesev zohov. One second, Mr. Onkelos, are you lacking in anything? Do you need silver? Do you need gold? Do you need wealth? Why do you need to become a businessman? What is compelling you to become a businessman? My treasure troves, my treasure houses are open to you. You can take whatever you want. Don't become a businessman. Lead a life of leisure. You can not do any business and still survive and thrive and have a wonderful life. Why would you need to go into business? Omar Loi. So Onkelos responded to his uncle Hadrian and he said, Ani mevakesh la'asoi schoira. What does he say? Lotzeis lechutz leida das abrius. The reason I want to become a businessman is not because I want to make money. Obviously, I know our family is very wealthy and very powerful. We can have whatever we want. But I'd like to get to know the world. I want to become a man of the world. At the moment, I am confined to the palace and I have everything I need. It's true, but it's a bit boring and I don't feel I know enough about life. I'd like to know more about life. And the way I'm going to know more about life is if I go and do business with people. V'ani mevakesh, what is it that I want? V'ani mevakesh becha, I want to know from you what I need to do in order to become an international businessman. You're a person, you're a man of the world, you're very experienced, there's nothing you don't know, you've met everyone, you've seen everything. What can you advise me? I'm not asking you for money. I'm not even going into business because I want to make money, said Onkelos to Uncle Hadrian. But I'd like to know from you what it is, if I'm going to go into business, that I need to look out for. You see, it was a brilliant distraction. What he actually wanted to do was to convert to Judaism. But he went to his uncle, and in this very cunning way, he convinced his uncle to let him out of the palace, to free him from having to be part of the royal court, so that he could go out into the world. Now, obviously, he wanted to go to the Jewish people and become a Jew, but he didn't want to tell his uncle that. So he said, I need to have advice from you. He distracted him by asking him for his advice as to how he should become, and what he should look out for if he was going to become an international businessman. Omar Loi, so Hadrian was very flattered that his nephew should be asking him for this advice. Omar Loi, kol prakmatio she'ata royeh shefela unusuna ba'aretz. Any commodity that you see is not valued, it's considered to be very cheap, it's thrown to the ground, as it were. Lech asoik ba. Go and involve yourself, engage yourself in this commodity. It's very cheap, nobody wants it, and it's therefore something that you can buy at a very cheap price. Shesoifa lihis v'at mishtaker, and it will eventually go up in price and you will become very wealthy. You will profit from it as a result of the fact that you bought it when it was very cheap. Go onto the stock exchange, look for the cheap share that nobody wants to buy and that everybody is shorting the share. It's GameStop. You buy it and now you're going to make a lot of money because there's people out there who don't want it, but actually it's got real value. Ba loy la'aretz le'eretz Yisrael v'lo Torah. Anyway, Hadrian listened, nodded, I'm sure, at his uncle, and his uncle gave him a big kiss and sent him on his way. He didn't waste a moment. He went to Eretz Yisrael and he found a Beis Midrash and he sat there and he learnt, and that's what he did. He wanted to study Torah. That's the whole reason why he went. All right, that's the story so far. Continues the Midrash. La'achar zman mitzauhu Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Hoshua, the two great Tanoim. Of course, we know them from the Mishnais, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus and Rabbi Hoshua ben Chananya. These were the two great Tanoim who were always at loggerheads with each other. Rabbi Eliezer was very strict in his application of Jewish law. Even though he was a Talmud of Hillel, he was also a Talmud of Shammai. We've spoken about it before. Rabbi Hoshua was much more lax in terms of his interpretation of the law. He did not necessarily see the reason for chumros, and he was a much nicer person, if you wanted to spend an evening with somebody, you were probably more likely to be spending an evening with Rabbi Yeshua than with Rabbi Eliezer, who's a bit of a tougher person, not such fun to be with. Rabbi Yeshua was a wonderful person. We know the story with Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel tried to have him evicted from the Sanhedrin and from the Beis Midrash, as a result of which he was himself demoted and he was no longer the head of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yeshua was a beloved figure. In any event, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua were very good friends. I know it's hard to believe because they're always arguing in the Mishnah, but they were very good friends. They were once walking along the way, and guess what? They found this fellow, Onkelos, Akilas. They found him. They found Onkelos. Ra'uhu panov mishtanois, and they saw he looks completely different. The way he appeared had changed. He'd been sitting in a Beis Midrash for a long time, and obviously he'd taken on the look of a Ben Yeshiva. He didn't look like a Roman aristocrat anymore. He looked like somebody who belonged in the yeshiva. Omru zeh lo zeh, akilas loimei Torah. Said Rabbi Eliezer to Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Yeshua back to Rabbi Eliezer. Wow, look at this. Look what a change has occurred as a result of the fact that Akilas, that Onkelos, has studied Torah. Look how he looks. He looks completely different. His whole countenance has changed. His face has changed. His behavior has changed. His character has changed. Do you know why? Because he's learnt Torah. So that's one very important message contained in this Midrash, that somebody who studies Torah and does it lishma. We're not talking about somebody who studies Torah because they want to gain knowledge, or because they want to impress other people, or because they simply want to know what it is that the Torah says so that you can use it for some other purpose. Somebody who studies Torah lishma, who goes to yeshiva and wants to study Torah, who wants to have Torah knowledge because he knows that's what Hashem wants from him. He knows that Hashem says, "V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol ma'idecha v'hoyu hadvarim ha'el asher anechi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantom levanecha." Hashem wants us to love Him, and the proof of our love for Hashem is if we study Torah. What is the point of studying Torah? I don't know necessarily. I mean, some of the aspects of Torah are very important, because we need to know how to conduct our lives, but there's aspects of Torah. We know that all the study of Kodshim right now is of no necessity to us. We don't bring korbanos, but does that mean we don't study any of the tractates that can be found in Kodshim? That we shouldn't know how to bring korbanos? Do we miss out Vayikra in the Chumash because it's not relevant to us? We don't have to know how to bring a korban oil, a korban tomid, a korban shlamim, a korban pesach, because we're not bringing those korbanos? Not at all. We need to know. Why? V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol ma'idecha. Do you know what's going to happen to you if you study Torah? Do you know what's going to happen to you if you study the words of Torah? You will change. You could have started off as a nephew of Hadrian from the Roman court, from the royal house of Rome, a nephew of the emperor, and you'll end up as a Ben Torah. Your countenance will have changed. You can meet Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer, and they look at you and they say, "Is this the prince? The prince of Rome? Is this Mr. Onkelos who wants to convert to Judaism? Look at him now. Torah shogar b'piv. He's a person who can say over Dvar Torah. We can listen to him, we can learn with him, he knows Torah. His whole personality has changed because he studied Torah." That's the power of Torah. That's one message in this Midrash. But continues the Midrash. The Midrash says as follows: Kivun sheba etzlam hischil lishoil lohem she'elois harbe. Because he met with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, he began asking them many questions, and he of course became even more learned, a greater Talmud Chacham. Vehein meishivin oisai, they answered him. They respected him. That's also important. It's so important for a rabbi to be able to teach his Talmidim. Doesn't matter where they come from. You don't have to come from the best family necessarily. By the way, you can come from the best family and not be that interested in studying Torah, and the Rebbe also has to teach you. Doesn't matter who you are, what your level of learning is, what your level of knowledge is. Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer were willing to teach Onkelos. Whoever you are, you should teach whoever it is that wants to learn. Another message that's embedded in this wonderful Midrash. But let's continue. Ola Eitzel Adrianus Doidoi. He goes back to Rome, and immediately he has an audience with Uncle Hadrian. Hello, Uncle, he says to him. Omar Loi, veloma ponecho mishtanois. Hadrian noticed that Onkelos looks a bit different. When he left, he was wearing a toga, and when he comes back, he's wearing, I know I'm going to say this is going to sound ridiculous, but he's wearing a bocherische hat and a suit and a white shirt, or Streimel Beckischer, whatever it is that would have made him look completely different than someone who hangs out in the royal courts of Rome. And Hadrian was no fool. He saw that his nephew looks completely different. Sovur ani shehfsida pragmatio shelecha, oshema hatzar li heitzar lecha adam. He says, maybe you've been very unsuccessful in business, and the commodities you've invested in have lost you money. You've not been successful in anything that you've done, and that's why you look a bit different. You look maybe depressed. I don't know. You look as if you are downcast. You're downhearted. Or maybe it is that somebody's bothered you. Somebody has harmed you. I'll show them, says Hadrian. You're my nephew. I'll take care of them. And don't forget, he had the power of life and death of anybody he wanted. Hadrian was looking out for his nephew. He sees his nephew looks different. He doesn't look the same as when he left. He looks slightly down and out. So what was going on? That's what Hadrian wanted to know. Omaloi, love. That's not what happened. You know what? I'm your nephew. No one's going to do me any harm. I never lost any money. Omaloi, atakorevli v'oda meitzarli. So he says, are you related to me? If you're related to me, no one is going to harm me. Omaloi v'loma panecha mishtanois. In which case, why have you changed? You look so different. Everything about you looks different. There's something totally different about the way you look. Omaloi says Onkelos to his uncle. He takes the plunge and takes the risk. Do you know why I look different? Shelomadeti Torah, because I studied Torah. V'lo yoid ela shemalti es atzmi. Here we go. Crash, bang. He says it like it is. Hadrian, my uncle, the king and the emperor of Rome and the Roman Empire, you have forbidden for anyone to be circumcised, to have a bris milah. I had a bris milah. Hello, I'm your nephew. I had a bris milah. Omaloi, umi omalachokach. So Hadrian was very shocked. He says, who told you to have a bris milah? Who would have told you to do such a terrible thing? I'll go for them. I'll kill them. I'll destroy them, that they would have done this to you. Haha, Omaloi, becho nimlachti. Do you know who told me to have a bris milah? Uncle Hadrian? You did. Uncle Hadrian told me to have a bris milah. Omaloi, Amosai, says Uncle Hadrian to Onkelos. What are you talking about? When did I tell you that? I could never have told you such a thing. I have forbidden circumcision. There's no way that I would have told you to be circumcised. Omaloi, what are you talking about? Says Onkelos, b'shosha amarti lecha mevakesh ani la'asos chayra. Do you remember I came to you some time ago, and I asked you whether or not I could go into business, and I needed your help. V'amarta li, and you said to me, you gave me some very good advice. Do you know what the advice is that you gave me? Kol pragmatya shataroye shveila v'nusuna ba'aretz. Anything, any commodity that you see that is undervalued, that is cheap, it's thrown to the ground, nobody wants it. You know what you should do with it? Lech v'asoik ba, go and do business with that commodity. Why? Shesoifal is alois, because at the end that commodity will be valued. That commodity will go up in value and it will make you very, very wealthy. Ha ha ha! Says Onkelos, Chazarti al kolo ummais v'lo ra'isi umma shefeila nesuna ba'aretz K'Israel. I went around all the different nations of the world. I'm your nephew. I had access wherever I wanted to go. And I saw every nation in the world, but there was no nation that was a commodity that was less valued and more cheapened than the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation was treated like something that could be thrown to the ground, has no value. Everybody was shorting the Jewish nation. V'soifolis alois. But I recognized the fact. You told me, Uncle Hadrian, you said, find that commodity, and when you do, buy it. Oh, I bought it. V'soifolis alois. And I know that commodity is going to go up in value. It's going to elevate in value. It's going to make me very, very rich. Shekain Omar Yeshaya, because Isaiah the prophet said, this was the pasuk that was said by Yeshaya, Koi Omar Hashem, Goy El Yisrael, Kadoshoi, Livzoi Nefesh, Limasoev Goy, Le'eved, Moishlim Elohim, Yiru V'komu Sorim, V'ishtachvu Leman Hashem. The pasuk says, so says God, the Redeemer of Israel, His Holy One, to him who is despised of men, to him who is abhorred of nations, to a servant of rulers. You know what he says? Kings shall see and arise, princes, and they shall prostrate themselves because of God that is faithful, even the Holy One of Israel, who has chosen you. V'yishtachvu leman Hashem asher ne'emon kadosh Yisrael v'yivchoreka. That's the pasuk of Yeshaya that was quoted by Onkelos to Hadrian. And of course, I mean, the Midrash continues. It's a little shocking and jarring that one of Hadrian's, I don't know what to call them, the people who were operating the court, his right-hand man said, but why don't you just kill Onkelos? Anyway, he didn't kill Onkelos, and this guy went off and committed suicide. He was so shocked that Hadrian's own nephew would have converted to Judaism, the most despised religion of that particular period of ancient history. So we see here that the very first pasuk that was quoted by this Midrash was Magid Devarav Yaakov Chukov Umishpatov LeIsrael LaOsachen LeChol Goy Umishpatim Bal Yudom. The whole idea is that this is something which is specific to the Jewish nation, but it's not something that's available. It's not something that can be accessed by any goy, by any non-Jewish nation, by any Gentile. Mishpatim bal yudoim. That's what we say, that somehow they don't have access to this knowledge, to this spirituality, to this God closeness that is available to the Jewish people, just because they do the right thing, because they behave correctly. And even if the share price of the Jewish nation is very low, doesn't matter. Magid Devarav Liyaakov Chukov Mishpatov LiYisrael. We know that God is in direct communication with us. And now we're going to see what the K'sav Sofer says. The K'sav Sofer, you can see it on page 2 in your source sheet, was a son of the K'sav Sofer. The K'sav Sofer, the great rabbi of Pressburg, originally from Frankfurt am Main. He was a German Jew who had to escape from anti-Semitism in Frankfurt, ended up eventually as the Rav of Pressburg and one of the most sought-after rabbinic leaders of the period in the early 19th century, the early 1800s. He died in 1839. He had one wife, but unfortunately she never had children, and she died, and he remarried to the daughter of his contemporary, more or less the same age, Rabbi Akiva Eger, and he had many children from his second wife, and the oldest son was the K'sav Sofer. And the K'sav Sofer, who lived, I think, until the 1870s, if I remember correctly, he was also the Rav of Pressburg after his father died, and his son was the Shevet Sofer, and he was also the Rav of Pressburg, and he had a son called Rabbi Akiva Sofer, and he was also the Rav of Pressburg. And there's many descendants of the K'sav Sofer, and of course of the K'sav Sofer, and they are all of them in very distinguished positions around the Jewish world, whether they are rabbis or philanthropists or activists. The Sofer family, the Schreiber family, are deeply embedded and involved in every aspect of Jewish life across the Jewish world. The K'sav Sofer quotes this Midrash. He says, Ve'ela Mishpatim. The Pasuk at the beginning of Parshat Mishpatim says, what does it say? B'Midrash Maisa Alzeh, that the Midrash brings on this first Pasuk of Mishpatim, Ve'ela Mishpatim, Magid Devar Yaakov Chukov Mishpatav Yisrael. The Midrash associates this Pasuk in Tehillim of Magid Devar Yaakov Chukov Mishpatav Yisrael with the very first Pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, Ve'ela Mishpatim, which is at the beginning of Perek Chof Aleph in Sefer Shmos. Nira li, says the K'sav Sofer. What does he say? To understand Al Pi Tshuvas Ramah. The Ramah has a particular approach which is as follows. Da'af de b'nei noach metzuva al hadinim. So the Ramah says that even though Noachide descendants, which is basically every other human being on the planet besides for the Jewish nation, they're all commanded on something which we refer to, one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach is something called dinim, which is civil law. The law of society, the law that governs the way society should live. By the way, there's many comparisons, many similarities, many congruences between the civil law of B'nai Noach and the civil law that's contained in the Torah. And that's really what the K'sav Sofer wants to address. Mikol mokoim hayanu lodun din, avaloi bedinin shelonu davka. The fact that the B'nai Noach are instructed, expected, commanded to observe law, dinim, that doesn't mean that their dinim are the same as our dinim. Rak kafi asher yashpi'u heim v'lo nidstavo lahem ezo din yifsuku. They have to conduct themselves according to a law, but not necessarily the law as we are commanded. So the law that they have is in some respects an evolutionary law. Obviously, there's some givens in any law. You're not allowed to murder. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to be an abusive person or engage in sexual immorality. Those things are givens. But what are the definitions of those laws? How do we know what it means to steal or not to steal? So it's very easy for us. We open up the Shulchan Aruch in Choshen Mishpat, and we will know whether or not what we are doing is considered stealing, because the Choshen Mishpat has very clear rules as to what it means to steal if you are going to observe Jewish law. But it's not necessarily the case if you're observing secular law. And that's fine, because dinim is not governed by what it means to be a Torah-observant Jew. That's what the K'sav Sofer is saying. It's very interesting. It says, "V'lo nidstavo lahem ezo din yifsuku." It doesn't say exactly how they have to observe civil law. It doesn't tell them how to do it. It just says that they have to observe something called dinim. It's Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, the 7 Noachide laws, just tells them that one of the things that they need to do is have a civil society in which law and order must prevail. V'hainu magid dvar Yaakov, and that's what the pasuk means. By the way, that's what it means. Ve'ela hamishpatim. This is really what the pasuk is telling us. Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. These are the laws that you need to give to the Jewish nation. These are not the laws that govern society at large. These are specific laws that govern the way the society of the Jewish nation should be run. Magid devar Yaakov, chukov umishpatav, shemagid li Yisrael, ezo din sheyishpetu bein ish lere'ehu. We know that there are laws which are given called ve'ela hamishpatim laws. These are the laws that immediately followed the revelation at Mount Sinai. This is the way that we need to conduct ourselves if we want to have a relationship with Hashem, if we want to be good Jews. It's got nothing to do with being B'nai Noach. B'nai Noach also have laws, but they're not governed by the Torah. how should a person behave alongside someone else? But that's not the way that the laws were given to every nation. They don't know our laws. Not that they don't know them. It's not relevant to them. They don't need to know them. It's lifneihem. It's for the Jewish people. It's not for the remainder of society, for all the Gentile nations. Rakheim mitzuvim lodun uchahanal. They are simply expected to have a system of government and a system of law and order and a judiciary which makes sense and which makes sure that law and order will prevail. Whatever law and order they decide is relevant to their society. V'hainu demaisa medrash kan de lifneihem, and that's what it means when the Midrash correlates this pasuk from Tehillim with the word lifneihem in the pasuk of Ve'ela Mishpatim asher tosim lifneihem ve'lo lifnei nochrim. It's lifneihem. It's for the Jews. It's for the Jewish nation. It's not for the others. The lo lifnei nochrim, not for the others. Hagam shehem mitzuvim al hadinim, even though they are expected to observe civil law. What does that mean? Mikol mokem chiluk rav beineihem. There is a big difference between the civil laws that govern our society, Jewish society, the way the Jews are expected to live, and the way the Gentiles are expected to conduct themselves in their civil society. Continues the K'sav Sofer. Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. So we know that the pasuk is a curious pasuk because it connects somehow. Remember the letter Vav at the beginning of Ve'ela hamishpatim connects the mishpatim, the ordinances, the laws that are contained in this parsha with everything that comes before. Ve'ela hamishpatim, as Rashi says, K'sav Rashi, Lama nismecha Parshas Mishpatim leParshas Mizbeach. Why do we have this connection between the last part of Parshas Yisro, which talks about building a Mizbeach, an altar, and the Parsha of Mishpatim, the Parsha of laws, the chapter concerning the laws of governing a civil society? So, Lama nismecha Parshas Mishpatim leParshas Mizbeach, Loima lohishiv dayonim etzav haMizbeach. Says Rashi, by the way, he's quoting a Midrash, that the Dayanim had to be the most senior Jewish judges in any particular era, had to be situated, located in the area near the Mizbeach, near the altar. Nira li lahasbir, says the K'sav Sofer. I would like to explain this in a very wonderful way. But tuv tam vadas al pi shekosov Rashi le'el soif Parshas Yisro, based on something else that Rashi says towards the end of Parshat Yisro. What is that? The Mizbeach oso shalom ben Yisrael la'avim shebashamayim. The Mizbeach, the altar, what is the purpose of the altar? You bring korbanos, you bring sacrifices on the altar. That the only reason the altar is there is so that we should be able to sustain, maintain, and in fact engender a positive relationship between God and the Jewish people. We should enable there to be shalom, for there to be peace between God and His nation. Also shalom bein Yisrael avim shebashamayim hainu given shalidei mizbeach mischape lahem avanoisam naaseh shalom. Why is that? Because when you bring a korban, you bring a korban oila, you bring a korban chatos, you bring a korban asham, what does it do? Tell me, what does it do? Do you know what it does? It enables you to be at peace with God, because you may have done an Aveira, but now you've brought a korban, and you've done teshuvah, and now there's going to be peace between God and you who have done an Aveira. V'hinei korbanos mechaprim ala shoygegim, says the K'sav Sofer. What is a korban? How does it work? The whole concept of a korban is, if you did something but not on purpose, by mistake, you did something that was wrong, but it was an error, it was an oversight, it may have been a bit negligent, you should have done better, but you didn't want to do an Aveira in that sense, so you bring a korban, that's why you bring it, and that's going to help you. V'loy al hamezidin. But if you were mechalel Shabbos, for example, on purpose, or if you ate non-kosher food on purpose, or if whatever it is that you did it on purpose, you didn't do it by mistake, a korban isn't going to help. Do you know what Chazal tell us? Our sages, the Talmudic sages, teach us, Kesheyesh din lamata, ein din lamala. We should be very thankful when there is din, when a matter is concluded here on earth. Then when you get to Shamayim one day, Ad Mea Be'esrim, when you, after 120 years, you are standing in front of the Kisei HaKovod, in front of the heavenly throne, you won't be judged for things which, the matters which have been dealt with here, down below as it were. Lamata, ein din lamala, kisha ein din lamata, yesh din lamala. However, if you didn't settle matters when you were here, then when you get to Shamayim, those matters will need to be settled. There's going to be some form of retribution. There's going to be an action that will result from that. V'aklal kol zeh sheyesh teichacha ba'olam v'adayonim ma'anshim le'ovrei avera. In any aspect of your life where there can be some form of correction, as it were, here in this world, and the Dayanim make sure that that correction happens. Ma'anshin la'ovrei avera, they punish whatever the punishment is to that person who committed the sin. Oz Hashem misnaheg b'chesed imanu. Then if that's the case, Hashem is going to behave kindly towards us. If we have a system of government, a system of governance in this world, which makes sure that when something happens which is wrong, it's dealt with, then Hashem will behave beautifully towards us. Hashem will forgive us, and we will be as if we are tzaddikim. Aval, keshe'ein din u'mishpat la'akos be'egroi f'rasha. If a wicked person is not treated harshly in this world, somehow he gets away with his actions, ve'ein teichacha, and there's no admonition, he's not told off, he's tolerated, he's completely ignored as if he's done nothing wrong. Yesh din lamala. There's going to be a din upstairs, as it were, that God will deal with it. God will have to address it. Melech Eloi nisparach shemai b'mishpat yamid. When it comes to it, God will stand in judgment. He will have this midas hadin towards whoever it is who has done something wrong, because God is going to treat whatever the situation is as if it happened. He's not going to ignore it. Kishe'ein din b'mishpat yamid. Uchsiv b'shoftim lo yisachmoil v'lo yisichoseh v'lo yisisoponim, which is why it says in Parshat Shoftim that a dayan should never be in a situation where they ignore something, where they cover something up, where they allow something to happen. A dayan has to be someone who, when something wrong happens, they are going to act and they're going to make sure that whoever it is who's done it is at least given the possibility of doing teshuvah. That is the role of a dayan. That's what a dayan is there for. V'nira li Delochein nikroim dayonim Elokim. That, says the K'sav Sofer, is the reason why dayonim are referred to as Elokim. Elokim nitzov ba'adas keil, we say in the pasuk. Elokim meaning dayonim. We don't mean that God stands in judgment, but dayonim, judges, are in the place of God. By the way, much better for you to go to a dayan than to end up having to stand in front of God in the Olam HaEmes. You don't want to be in that situation. Make sure that whatever retribution needs to take place is going to happen, as it were, here. Lamata, not lamala. We don't want it to be lamala. Ad Elokecha yovay davar shneim ki tzrichim lasos din v'lo l'rachem. The job of a dayan is to make sure that judgment is carried out, and they can't have mercy, because having mercy is actually going to damage the relationship between Klal Yisrael as a whole and God. That we don't want to happen. Says the K'sav Sofer, ve'erachti oiba mokem acher, and he says, I've actually spoken about this at great length elsewhere. This is the reason why dayanim have to be put next to the Mizbeach. This explains the Rashi at the beginning of Parshat Mishpatim. Kamoi ha-Mizbeach oiseh sholem ben Yisrael aviem b'shamayim. Just as the Mizbeach has this ability to create harmony, to create peace, to create a good relationship between God and the Jewish nation, Kain hadayonim k'sha'osim din lamata Ein din lamala. We know that when Dayanim do din lamata, they make sure that the halacha is upheld, and they make sure that there is no injustice, and that the way that people behave towards each other is perfect as much as they can with every effort. If there's yesh din lamata, then ein din lamala, then those people won't be held accountable when they get to Shamayim. V'oisim shalom ben Yisrael avim shebashamayim, and in that way they enable there to be peace and the harmony between God and the Jewish nation. That we, the Jewish nation, are enabled in our relationship between ourselves and God. Umachaprin al hamezidim, and they will be forgiven even for the things that they've done wrong, which they did on purpose. Let's say somebody stole money from somebody else, comes in front of the Dayanim in a din Torah, and the Dayanim, they're not frightened to do the right thing, and they say, you owe that guy the money, and the guy pays the money back. It was amazing, he stole the money, he knew what he was doing. And because of that, just like what we have in the Mizbeach, which is to do with Shoigegim, we have with Mezidim and a Beis Din, where they can make sure that Shuvah happens, the money is paid back, and the relationship between us and God isn't damaged because of the crimes that were committed between man and man within society. That's what it means when it says, and these are the ordinances, these are the laws. It's going on that which came previously, which is to do with the Mizbeach. Sheyesh oid kapora ala mezidim. Even though the Mizbeach doesn't offer any kind of kapora, any kind of penitence for things that weren't done on purpose, that were done on purpose, only for things that were done by mistake. But we have actually, because Dayanim sit next to the Mizbeach, that's the hint, that's the sign that there is the possibility, even with Mezidim, even things for things that were done on purpose, that we can have retribution, we can have a solution. Sheyesh oid kapora ala mezidim lahatzil me'onesh shamayim, to save the nation and to save the individual from punishment from heaven. Uletavech hasholem, to make sure that we establish and maintain and sustain peace and harmony. Alidei hamishpatim v'dinim shalom al Yisrael, because through carrying out the rules and regulations, making sure that we honor and uphold those rules and regulations as contained in Parshat Mishpatim, we can make sure that we sustain our relationship with Hashem. Shalom al Yisrael. I actually have a K'sav Sofer as number 4, source number 4. I'm not going to go through it now. It's a fascinating piece. You can look at it yourself. But I'd like to end off with a piece from Rabbi Israel of Ruzhyn. I wrote recently an article about the shenanigans in the court of Sadiger, because the Rebbe, who I knew very well, Rabbi Israel Moshe, he lived in London for many years. He was the Rebbe for the last 7 years, and unfortunately he died last August, and there's been some dispute and disagreement as to who should take over as the new Rebbe of Sadiger. And I wrote this article, and some of the followers of Sadiger, even the family of the Ruzhyn dynasty, were concerned that I don't maintain a full respect and regard for the Ruzhyn dynasty because of some of the things I wrote. But let me tell you, I have the highest regard for the Ruzhyn dynasty. They brought back the royalty of King David into the Jewish nation. They managed to create an aura of respect for rebbes, for rabbis, that had previously not existed in quite the same way. And I have the highest regard, of course, for Rabbi Israel of Ruzhyn, as he's known in the Chassidish world, the Heilige Ruzhiner, the Holy Ruzhiner. And we're now going to say Dvar Torah from him on this very first pasuk of Parshat Mishpatim. Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. This is taken from the Sefer Bnei Yisrael. I think there's 7 volumes of Bnei Yisrael. I have the first 2, and hopefully one day I'll have the subsequent 5. But it's a fabulous Sefer that contains Divrei Torah and historical episodes from the house of Ruzhyn. B'Sefer Ilona Dechaye. in this Sefer Ilana de Chaye, Mevi b'shem Moran Mirizhin Zchusa Yogan Aleinu Shepirish B'Kodshay. They bring an explanation on this first posuk of Parshat Mishpatim from the Heilige Ruzhyn, from the holy first rabbi of the Ruzhyn, Chasidim, Rabbi Israel of Ruzhyn. Shehadinim yu lifneihem v'lo la'achareihem. That's what the Ruzhyn said, that when it says ve'eleh hamishpatim asher tosim lifneihem, the word lifneihem was said on purpose specifically, that anything which is a mishpat should be lifneihem, not la'achareihem, should be ahead of you, in front of you in time, as it were, rather than behind you, something that's in the past. V'shom ba'gos mitame Yitzchak, and there is an explanation in the notes of the Matame Yitzchak, K'sav, v'ulai efshel lahasber kavanos hakadosh. Perhaps we can explain exactly what he meant as follows. Al pimasha omar hayehudi hakadosh zechusi yogan aleinu, the holy Jew of Pshischa, the Yid HaKadosh of Pshischa, he said as follows: Bavir peluktas beishamai beshilal bener Chanukah al dvar haremes. He explained, he had a wonderful explanation about the dispute, the disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about how we light Hanukkah candles. We know that, we spoke about it only a few weeks ago. What is the dispute? The Beis Shammai omrim yom rishon madlik shemoina, mikan va'elech poiches v'hoilech. On the first night of Hanukkah, says Beis Shammai, we light 8 lights, and each night after that, the second night we light 7, the third night 6, etc., all the way through to 1. Poiches v'hoilech. Each night we light 1 less than the night before. Beis Hillel omrim, what does Beis Hillel say? Yom rishon madlik achas, mikan va'elech moisif v'hoilech. Beis Hillel says the opposite. On the first night, this is what we do. We light 1, and the second night 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 8th night we light 8. It's a Gemara, is in Shabbos Daf Chof Aleph Amud Beis. The Beis Shammai Sovri says, the Yid HaKadosh, that what Beis Shammai believes is shekoidem re'odam lasur mehora v'yisakein ma she'ivas. The first thing a person has to do is to make sure that he's eradicated any evil in his actions and in his life. That's the first and most prominent thing that you need to think about. You need to be a poiches v'hoilech. You started off fully bad, and slowly but surely you're going to eradicate and eliminate the bad in your life. Because you're a sur meira, you're distancing yourself from bad, you will be a poiches v'hoilech. Each day you will be less bad than you were the day before. Or Beis Hillel, Savri, but Beis Hillel says something different completely. Moisif v'hoilech. You have to increase each day. What is he talking about? Shemiyad yireh lahisif v'torah mitzvahs. That you should always, every day, increase on the amount of Torah and mitzvahs that you are involved in. That's what's important. U'memele yeh yedei zeh sor meira v'halocha k'Beis Hillel. And in that way, automatically, you will have distanced yourself from bad because you're doing good, and that's how we paskin. We paskin like Beis Hillel, that you start off with 1 and you end up with 8. You always increase on the amount of good. Don't worry about decreasing the amount of bad. Focus on the good, and the bad will automatically be out of your life. Ki lahamtin achi isake nesara, because to wait until you've managed to correct that which is bad in your life, va'oz yaschel asos tov, and only then, after you've been poiches v'hoilech, and at the end of the 8 days, as it were, but Chanukah is just a kind of remez to it. But the idea being that if you're going to wait until you're able to say, well, there's no more bad in my life, and now I can start doing good, yochlu hayomim v'heim lo yochlu. So, v'hinei, asiyas ha-mitzvahs, v'lilmoid v'lispalel karoi. Doing mitzvahs and learning Torah and davening properly, nikra lifneihem. That's called, says the Mitame Yitzchak, who's explaining the words of the Ruzhyn. He says that's called lifneihem, in front of you. Why? Pirish masha lifneihem oid is because you still have to do it. You didn't do it yet. Now you're going to do a mitzvah. You're going to daven better. Whatever it is you're going to do is ahead of you. It's in the future. V'charota u'teshuva al ha'avonos nikra la'achreihem. That which you regret, which was done in the past, of course, I mean, It makes perfect sense. That's in the past. Because you're very, very busy with that which happened before, something in the past, and you want to correct it and you want to deal with it. And maybe that's what the Heilige Ruzhyn, the holy Rabbi Israel of Ruzhyn, that's what he meant when he said what he said about the pasuk ve'ela mishpatim asher tosim lifneihem bidvarav hakadoshim shahadinim yu lifneihem v'lo lachreihem. That which you need to do, it should always be something which you consider to be in front of you. Don't be somebody who's dwelling on the past and about everything bad that's ever happened. Focus on the future. Be upbeat about the future. Be upbeat about what you can do, not depressed about what you did and may not have gone according to plan. When somebody is going through, as it were, mishpatim about the things that are going on in his life, what you need to do is say, okay, whatever has happened in the past, that's happened. Now, from now on, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to improve whatever it is that I can improve so that I can be the best person that I can be. Don't dwell on the past. Dwelling on the past, and by the way, this is a big theme in Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Dwelling on the past and being depressed about all the things that are wrong in your life is just the Yetzer Hara's way of making sure that you don't do what you need to do, as the Rishna says, lifneihem, in front of you, ahead of you. How's your life going to look from now on? Not how did it look yesterday and last week and last month and last year, but how is it going to look ahead of you? What am I going to do to change my life ahead? We'll deal with the past when we get to it, but the most important thing now is ve'ela mishpatim asher tosim lifneihem rotzolema sheyitapel rak betikoin ha'achor ki lo izu haderech asher yelech ba. Somebody who's worried about la'achareihem, somebody who's only worried about the past, is going to be so focused on that they're not going to be concerned about the future. And by the way, the present right now, tomorrow is going to be the past, and you're going to regret that too. So make sure that your focus is fully on the future, fully on the positive, fully on the upbeat, that you can feel the best way that you can feel about what's going to happen tomorrow and next week, in a month and in the year, because it's going to be better than it was. The good times follow bad times. Anything that happens to you from now on should be positive. That's the message of the very first pasuk in Parshat Mishpatim, ve'ele hamishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. These are the dinim that I put in front of you. These are the dinim. These are the things that I put in front of you, ahead of you in the future. We'll leave it here for today.